Hi, my name is Aubrey Page, and I am an FASD educator. I'm also the CEO of the Change Starts Here Collaborative. The Change Starts Here Collaborative partners with parents and professionals of kids with brain-based disabilities to provide support and resources. And this is one of those resources, a quick explanation of what FASD is. It's something that you probably haven't heard about before, but it's actually really common. And so I'm going to go through what it is, how common it is, what it can look like, and all the different populations that it affects. And I'm going to try to get it in under 10 minutes. I will note that I am not a doctor, social worker, lawyer. Please don't sue me. But we're going to do a quick training. So this is the definition. I'm going to read it to you, and then you're going to know everything you need to know on FASDs. FASD, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, is a lifelong disability that affects the brain and body of people who are exposed to alcohol in the womb. Each person with FASD has both strengths and challenges and will need special supports to help them succeed with many different parts of their daily lives. That's an amazing definition by CAN FASD, but it is by no means all-inclusive, right? It doesn't explain everything because you can't, because FASD is a spectrum disorder, and so the symptoms vary widely. So how common it is? It can't be that common because you haven't heard about it, right? Well, let's look at this. Let's compare it to other disabilities. Fragile X is one of the disabilities that we say is very commonly associated with intellectual disabilities, but it affects 0.0115% of the population. Down syndrome affects 0.14% of the population. That's a disability we recognize. We have some supports in place for. NAS, or neonatal abstinence syndrome, are the effects that some children have when they've been exposed to drugs in utero. Nationally, that number is 0.6%. In certain parts of the United States, the numbers are higher, like in Ohio, it's 1.5%. But NAS is something else that doctors are working towards. We're opening special clinics for. Autism, 1.5%, way higher than anything else, right? We have a special category in the IEP for autism. We have scholarships. We have private schools. There's a lot of resources for autism. It automatically qualifies you for many programs. And that makes sense because it is so much more common comparative to the other disabilities, right? Right. FASD affects 5% of the population in America. And Canadians, I haven't forgotten about you. That's 4% of the Canadian population. So in America, we're talking about 16 million Americans. And in Ohio alone, we're talking about 584,500 Ohioans. And that's just the individuals with FASD. But it's very rare to be diagnosed. A study in 2018 found about only 1% of the children were previously diagnosed, which means there are many unidentified people operating in the United States, Canada, and all around the world with FASD who just don't know. But why am I even talking to you about alcohol? Why am I not talking about drugs? Because that's the big thing, right? Look at this 1996 report to Congress. Of all the substances of abuse, including cocaine, heroin, and marijuana, alcohol produces by far the most serious neurobehavioral effects in the fetus. What? That was not what I learned. I did not learn that. I learned that drugs were the big culprit. And so we really want to dispel that myth and talk about how alcohol does create lifelong effects. There are some children who outgrow the delays that drugs have impacted on them, even children that have NAS, which is not all children that were exposed to drugs in utero. But even if we're talking about children that were exposed to drugs in utero, a lot of times I'll hear, oh, they were exposed to drugs, not alcohol. But of the pregnancies that were drug exposed, 90% of those were also alcohol exposed, which makes sense. It's something that's easily accessible. It's not as stigmatized as drugs. You don't have to hide off in the corner. You can drink in front of whoever. So I think that this is an important thing to remember as we go to advocate for children who are exposed to drugs in utero. But how does this even happen? Like, what kind of person drinks during pregnancy? A lot of people. If you look at this chart, 4 to 6 weeks is when most women find out that they're pregnant. And at that point, we've already started developing. The central nervous system starts in week 3, so early in pregnancy. The heart, arms, legs, eyes, ears, all of that has already started developing. So it's just so early in pregnancy, most women don't even know they're pregnant. And so if they're already socially drinking, then it makes sense that they would have an alcohol-exposed pregnancy. When we're talking about things like facial features, which are something that we highly associated with FASD, we're thinking that that affects most of the kids, but in fact, only 10 to 15% of the kids have facial features because you have to have alcohol exposure during specific days in pregnancy around about here. And so if you don't have alcohol exposure during that time, then you won't have facial features, which means 85 to 90% of the kids don't have facial features. Alcohol is a risk factor for FASD, but there are many other risk factors. You can't say, oh, well, I drank and my kid's fine, so you can drink, because maternal genetics play a role. And you can't say, my other kids are fine, so this kid will be fine, because fetal genetics play a role. So it's just no safe amount with alcohol exposure. Why would a woman drink during pregnancy? The CDC did a study and asked women in their first trimester how many of them had drank in the previous month, and 1 in 5 of them said that they had, which means 20% of the pregnancies were potentially alcohol exposed. So why would you drink? I believe no woman drinks with the intention of harming her child. I believe there are 3 reasons a pregnancy might be alcohol exposed. Reason 1, they don't know they're pregnant. Most women don't know they're pregnant until 4 to 6 weeks. 50% of pregnancies are unplanned. 2, they don't know it's not safe because most doctors are not talking about it and giving messaging during the obstetrics appointment, despite the fact that ACOG, WHO, CDC, everybody recommends no alcohol is safe during pregnancy. Some are even being told that occasionally drinks are fine. Or 3, they don't know how to stop. We can't tell women to stop drinking without giving them the tools to stop drinking. This is very important that we recognize that alcoholism doesn't look a certain way. And then also we need to make sure that we're supporting and not shaming families, because it's really easy to shame somebody, but it of course looks different for each person. Who does FASD affect? 1% of individuals were previously diagnosed. 80% of individuals with FASD are misdiagnosed. 80% of individuals with FASD have an IQ higher than 70, which means that most of them are not going to qualify for DD services right off the bat without another diagnosis, another qualifying diagnosis, and also have trouble qualifying in school. Individuals with FASD are 17 to 19 times more likely to be in foster care. It's a little bit of an older statistic. We don't have a newer one at this point, but the point is it's very common in foster care. And then individuals with FASD are 30 times more likely to have contact with the justice system. When you see all of this, what do you think? What I want you to think is this is multi-system youth. That's who I'm talking about right now. So how do we even identify this? Well, we have brain domains that we recognize as part of how Canada diagnoses, and we recognize that things like executive functioning, which is how we organize our mind. Executive functioning is what we do with what we know, and so it's how we execute things, how we focus, how we pay attention, how we transition from subject to subject. Look up a video on executive functioning. It is fascinating. Memory is that usually our kids with FASD have great long-term memory. It's the short-term memory or working memory that can be challenged. So getting things from short-term memory to long-term memory can be challenged. Pulling things from long-term memory to short-term memory can be challenged. Remembering those things in short-term memory for just a couple seconds can have a hard time. And because of that, sometimes we see things like confabulation. Social cognition or social skills are things that how our kids interact with other peers around them. So a lot of times we'll see a kid who has a chronological age here, but their developmental age is here, and that gap causes frustration for both them and their peers. And so getting them speech therapy in order to support that is very important. Language, usually our kids are great at expressive language, but they struggle with receptive language, which often means that people are saying, oh my gosh, they're so mature, they love them so much, but they have a really hard time understanding that they didn't really understand what was happening in class. Attention, when we think attention, we think ADHD, which means that kids are often given ADHD medication, and for kids with FASD, their brain is not different in the same way as kids with ADHD, although they often can still have a hyperactivity in attention. If they are given ADHD medication, especially stimulants, it can often make them aggressive. When we have an aggressive child, what do? We medicate them more. So we have to make sure that we are, in fact, working with a child who has ADHD, and we're not medicating a child who doesn't have ADHD but still has the symptoms. Neuroanatomy and neurophysiology, there are 400 comorbid diagnoses with FASD, including seizures, limb deformation, brain organ deformation, vision, hearing problems. All of those things are associated with FASD. We also see kids with interoception struggles or their brain and body not talking, which can cause like incontinence. When we're looking at motor skills, we're looking at kids who have vestibular and proprioceptive issues. So their just sensory processing in general is off. Cognition, we've already talked about, not a requirement, but it can be a symptom. Academic achievement, of course, if you struggle socially and you struggle with executive functioning and attention and everything, you're going to struggle in school. And then mood regulation. Sometimes kids with FASD have a hard time regulating and not getting too angry over a certain situation, or maybe crying very frequently. Those things can be hard because of how their brain was changed. So that's 10 different brain domains, all of the ways that the brain can be affected by prenatal alcohol exposure. That was a really fast overview, but I really wanted to get it under 10 minutes. I hope you will connect with me to learn more, because there is so much more to learn on this topic. I have courses on it. I have courses on other forms of neurodiversity, including ADHD and autism. I just want to spread the word and get awareness for these kids. So please share this video with 3 of your friends so that 3 more people know what FASD is. Thank you so much.